The RacinBoys and Track Talk, brought to you by McCarthy Chevrolet in Olathe, with a $10,000 low price guarantee.
Welcome to Hour 2 of the Midwest #1 weekly motorsports show, Track Talk, on the RacinBoys Broadcasting Network, brought to you by McCarthy Chevrolet. Once again, here's Scott Traylor and Kirk Elliott.
And welcome back. Hour number 2, exclusively here on RacinBoys.com. I am Kirk Elliott, and joining us here this morning is Troy Harrison, who is sitting in, as he does occasionally here with the RacinBoys. Scott Traylor not with us here this morning, as he is traveling from Salina, Oklahoma to West Memphis, Arkansas, which is about a 6-hour trip. And so he's got it all the time he needs, which is every bit of the time that the race is ended at Salina, Oklahoma, to get to West Memphis in time for tonight's race. You can hear it live right here on RacinBoys beginning at about 7:30. So we're just going to sit here, Troy and I. We're going to talk racing. We're going to open up the telephone lines. You see the numbers on the screen right now. 816-833-8553. A little bit later on in the hour, Tim Tuttle, the PR guy for the Lucas Oil Power I Series, will check in. They have started a big weekend of racing at Jacksonville, Illinois last night. He'll fill us in on that and what's going to happen at Macon tonight. But next Friday night at Valley Speedway, the Power I Midgets are going to be in action. Looking forward to that event. And then next Saturday night at Lucas Oil Speedway, they're going to be down there for that. So we'll talk about that. In the meantime, give us a call during the show and join us in on the chat room as well at RacinBoys.com. And we'll kick around a lot of mostly local dirt track racing. We've kind of hashed out the pavement stuff in the first hour, and Hollywood Bob giving us his take about Kansas Speedway, which I don't think he's alone, Troy. I think there's a lot of people out there that would share his sentiments about the racing being not very exciting. We'll just put it that way.
I think I would agree with you. It's just like you and I were talking. You sit in the stands, you hear people say things, you hear people saying things afterwards. I'm anxious to see what the reconfiguration does. Let's put it that way.
Well, if it's anything like Homestead, then I think it's going to be better. And I think you always worry about a new paved racetrack lending itself to single-file racing for a while, as it did when this track was first built. We really didn't see guys going up to the high groove until 4 or 5 years into it. And if the progressive banking makes the racing better, I think putting a little bit more banking in it will help. But I think what we talked about earlier about some of the aerodynamics on the race cars need to be addressed, which we don't have to worry about here on the local dirt tracks, do we? That's why we love it.
It's funny. As a lot of people know, I still write for Dirt Late Model and Dirt Modified magazines. And I was actually in contact with my editor last week. He had a letter from a reader who had come over to dirt racing from sports car racing, and he was asking about doing a story on aerodynamics on dirt late models. And my comment back is aerodynamics on a dirt late model may be one of the most overrated topics in racing. Yeah, okay, you put an 8-inch spoiler on the car, you can feel it. There is some differences there, but here's the thing that I don't think a lot of people understand. I've seen a lot of these wind tunnel stories where they're wind tunneling a dirt late model, and they'll come up with some pretty amazing figures. I think one story they came up with a figure of something like 500 pounds of downforce on the rear end at 100 miles per hour. And what I told my editor was, okay, this is under perfect conditions, in a wind tunnel, without rocks flying at the car, with all the sheet metal being straight. A dirt late model doesn't run at 100 miles per hour most of the time on short tracks, and the downforce decreases with the square of the speed. I mean, I went through a lot of things, and basically what I said is most dirt late model guys will get a lot farther by understanding how to set up the chassis on their car than worrying about what the aero is. We've seen dirt races where a car had the body half tore off of it and still won, which tells you a lot about the need for that body in the first place. So you're absolutely right. Aerodynamics, not a big deal on dirt racing. That's one reason to love it.
But we say that, and I've been out to some of these tracks already this year, and how about the panels on some of these modifieds we're seeing nowadays? These bodies are getting a lot bigger on these modifieds. Why is that? Is it aerodynamics can play some kind of a role? Otherwise, we wouldn't have these bigger bodies.
Why not? Why wouldn't they? I think a lot of them. I think a lot of them are doing it to make them look more like a late model. Seriously,
it's more looks.
Yeah. I think it's aesthetics, and I think a lot of them are doing it just because nobody's calling them back on it. You know, that. Racers will do whatever you allow them to do.
Yeah.
If somebody goes out, if Tom Charles goes up to Thunderhill Speedway tonight, and on top of his car, he has 4 dried-up buffalo turds glued to the top of his car, and Tom goes out and wins that race by a straightaway, next week you're going to see 5 cars with 4 buffalo turds glued to the top of their car. They don't know what it's for, but they know that Tom won it doing it that way. Somebody built his body bigger, went out and won a few races, and then the next thing you know, more guys are doing it. Aerodynamics matter even less on a dirt modified because the open wheels dirty up anything you'd want to do anyway.
So does that mean that I was looking at Tom Charles' car last night?
And by the way, not to insinuate that Tom's cars have buffalo turds on them.
No. But
he might buy tonight because I said that.
I'm looking at Tom's car last night, and it's IMCA legal. It's got the flat tappet tappet cam, and the 9-inch rear end, and everything that an IMCA modified. So does that mean if he'd have gone out there last night and won the race, then everybody would be running what he's got?
Well, I'll tell you what. There is one of the big, I don't know if you call it a myth, but if he won last night's race,
I'm saying he had a flat tappet cam. I need to clarify that.
Nobody would say that the flat tappet cam was an advantage, but what they would say is that the less resistance of the 9-inch rear made up for it, because that's one of the big things about racing. And every now and then you'll see a guy build a late model with a 9-inch rear because he's convinced that the lower horsepower drag of a 9-inch rear is some sort of an advantage. I've seen guys do it for 20 years, and then they realize it's not an advantage because whatever you gain that way, you lose by the ability not to fine-tune your gears. But people would be saying that. Now, would they do that?
No,
probably not. But
they'd save a lot of money if they won races. Having that kind of a package, wouldn't they?
I think there is the potential that they would save a lot of money. I tell you what. The big expense and issue that a lot of short track racers are going to face right now, and this is an article I'm working on, is DOT regulations. For many, many years, we've seen these guys go into the races with bigger and bigger circus wagons hauling their cars. And they've lost sight of one crucial fact. The Federal Department of Transportation guideline and rule, which is what all the state DOTs have to abide by, is 65-foot length tip to tip. And there are a lot of DOTs cracking down. I think it's because of the fatal accident that happened just south of here with the conversion RV rig. But what is going to happen this year, and not to dive too heavily into it because it is an article and I don't want to give it all away on the radio, but there's going to be a lot of guys that get stopped this year. There's going to be a lot of guys that get tickets this year. There are going to be a lot of guys that are told that their RV registration's invalid because they're engaged in a commercial enterprise by racing. And it's going to be something that's going to hit
that would hurt.
Well, let's be honest.
Because most of the rigs out there pulling these cars down the road are that way, aren't they?
A lot, most of them are. And let's be honest, a lot of them are abusing the RV regulations. They know it. We know it. And I think a lot of those guys are either going to get really upset or they're going to just look at it and say, you know what, we had a good ride for a long time. I talked to one DOT official from Iowa, and he said that they sat outside of a racetrack 2 weeks ago, and they counted at least 40 rigs that they knew were longer than the federal DOT guidelines. They said the cheapest one of these rigs probably sold for $100,000, and he said, if you can afford a $100,000 rig, you can afford what it takes to properly insure and license a driver. But there is a crackdown because of these morons that, pardon me, but these people that let a 17-year-old kid drive a 25-ton rig, and he crashed it. And that has opened up a lot of eyes around the country to the idea that, hey, there's a lot of these rigs running up and down the road that are every bit as heavy, every bit as unwieldy as a semi, but they don't require the same driver's license. The drivers, and in a lot of cases, may not be as skilled. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to be something that's going to impact short track racing pretty heavily this year.
Which means that we'll go back to the past, where most of these cars were hauled in on open trailers with the tire rack above it, and
which might be the best.
Bring these cars back the way they used to do it.
And you know what? That might be the best thing for short track racing.
Put the money in the race car instead of the hauler.
Have you ever seen anybody see a big white box on wheels going down the road and go, hey, let's follow that and see where it's going?
Yeah.
You see guys do that with race cars.
Well, I remember growing up as a kid, I thought it was really cool that you could actually see the race car on the truck rolling down the road. That to me is better than if you're a kid watching a plain trailer going down the road. You can't see the race car.
Oh yeah, I still want to. I'm still looking around. I'd still like to find a ramp truck to haul my car with. That's just one of my things. Very convenient, very easy to deal with. But but like I said, a lot of these rigs are going to be pulled off. They're going to be going through weigh stations, and they're going to be checked for shipping papers on whatever fuel and chemicals. I mean, it's
nightmare. You're going to be more stressed out about getting the car to the racetrack than you are actually making the car go fast to win races.
I talked to Joe Koziski a few years ago about his big hauler, because Joe has I don't know if he still does. He had one of those big conversion rigs about 3 or 4 years ago. And I asked him about it. I said, how do you like this thing? He goes, I'll be real honest with you. He says, I like it at the racetrack, but he says, hell, by the time I drive from Omaha to here, I'm half worn out just from driving the rig. And I don't know. To me, it wouldn't be worth it, but I understand a lot of these guys are, they're going up and down the road. They're racing more or less professionally, but they're going to have to figure out how to do it within a different package.
Yeah. Well, there was some racing action last night, I should say. Lakeside Speedway was not part of that, although they did get some heat races in, got about half the heat races in before the rains came. And so everybody they'll wipe all those races clean, and people keep their rain checks and come back next Friday night for another program out there. But they did get races in at LA Raceway last night. And Steven Muhlenberg won the USRA modified feature. Mitchell Moore continues to dominate the 305 class. Tyler Lewis in the B-Mod division. Sundance Keeper, love that name, street stock winner. And Michael Tyler in the hobby stock class. First Friday night show out at Valley Speedway, or out at LA Raceway. And they'll do it again next week down at LA Raceway. And at Valley Speedway, no Friday night racing yet. They'll start their open wheel program. I believe that's next week, but they'll have races tonight out at Valley Speedway. And they did run at Humboldt Speedway last night. 13-year-old Trevor Hunt. Trevor Hunt wins again. Remember, he won the $1,000 to win race as part of the King of America Nationals down there a few weeks ago. He goes down there last night and does it again. And Rodney Singh winning the USRA modified feature at Humboldt Speedway. Some of the action around last night. Eagle Raceway was supposed to have run the World of Outlaws last night. That has been postponed till September. They called that race off a couple of days ago because it was just too wet up there. I guess they got a ton of rain up there that wasn't able to dry out. They called it off early. They'll be at Knoxville tonight for the World of Outlaws, and other racing action tonight. I-35 Speedway, Lucas Oil Speedway, and also Heartland Park, Topeka, with racing action tonight. So there you go, a little bit of an update on what has occurred in the last 24 hours around the local dirt tracks and what's to come up tonight.
One of the things I'm looking forward to, and I looked at the schedule. I think May 11th is the first night for it. But out at Valley they're going to go to on every other Friday night, they're going to be having the ULMA late models along with the non-wing Valley sprints. And for me, that's kind of a trip back in time.
Yeah.
That used to be the show at Lakeside and the Topeka Fairgrounds years ago. You had late models, you had non-wing sprint cars. And it's been a long time since anybody paired those two things up in a weekly show. Really looking forward to that. Full disclosure, I am a contingency sponsor with the ULMA this year, so I've got another reason to look forward to it. But I think it's going to be great. The ULMA feature on opening night out there was outstanding, decided by about the length of a nose piece. And I know those guys are excited to be back at Valley. And yeah, I also think the Valley Sprint cars are one of the real big success stories in weekly racing around here. Just the idea that you can run a weekly sprint car class had kind of gotten away from a lot of people. Dennis has managed to do it. Hats off to him.
And they had the Midwest Lightning Sprints, and they'll still run out there. On occasion, they were at Humboldt Speedway. We'll get you some results here if they come in here soon. They ran at Humboldt last night. Now, tonight is opening night at Thunder Hill Speedway. And, of course, a couple of years ago, the Concrete family purchased that racetrack. They've done a lot of work rebuilding the facility, getting it back up, getting the track back to the way it used to be. I thought it was not the Thunder Hill Speedway that we all remember for several years until the Concretes purchased the track, and they've gone in and they've rebuilt that racetrack. And, hey, Kansas Speedway, not the only racetrack next to a casino, Thunder Hill Speedway.
Hill,
they were next to a casino long before Kansas Speedway.
That's right. Thunder Hill is right down the road from the Prairie Bend Casino. And, yeah, that's something else. For many years, there was really not a relationship between the casino and the racetrack. Now there is. That's actually where the banquet was held this year. And, and there's a little bit of co-promotion going on, which is exciting stuff. So if if you're making a trip to Thunder Hill and you've got to stay in a hotel, beautiful hotel there. One of the things I think that's really exciting at Thunder Hill, Brian LaRiviere, last year's Northern Sport Mod champ, has announced that he's going to be competing weekly at Thunder Hill Speedway this year in an effort to win a second national championship. That's some pretty exciting stuff.
The national champion.
That raises the level, just like Jordan Grabowski did in the BSB Manufacturing Modifieds last year.
Is he coming back on a weekly basis?
Jordan will not. Jordan, what he has said is he's not going to run for points anywhere. He's going to run where he wants, when he wants, but at the same time, he plans to get in quite a few weekly shows at Thunder Hill. So if he stays true to his word, he won't be a factor in the points, but he will be a factor, obviously, on the racetrack whenever he shows up. Had mechanical problems with the Fool's Day Meltdown, was not a factor in that. Also, Adam and the father and son team of Adam and Roy Armstrong, actually Roy's the father, I believe Adam won the regional IMCA Hobby Stock title last year. They will be competing regularly this year in the BuyRaceParts.com IMCA Hobby Stock class at Thunder Hill. So quite a few drivers from other areas are really noticing what's going on and saying, hey, we want to be a part of it. Pretty exciting.
How's the IMCA program working out after one season at Thunder Hill Speedway and also going up against Heartland Park Topeka on Saturday nights?
Well, it's definitely created a choice. The year before, the first year the Concretes had it, there were the transition rules, which allowed a more open spec modified to compete alongside with the IMCA cars. Now it's a full IMCA program. Car counts, a lot of people predicted that car counts might go down last year. They didn't. They went up in every class. Every class had more cars last year than they did the year before, and I think that's going to be true again this year. There's a lot of guys building cars for IMCA, plus there's IMCA cars from other areas that are coming down, supposed to get more cars coming out of Beatrice this year. With the changes in central Kansas, Minneapolis Raceway closing, they used to be an IMCA Saturday night program. Now those guys are going to run Salina Speedway, but on Friday nights. And a lot of those, that's where LaRiviere is coming from. A lot of those guys are going to be coming up I-70 and running Thunder Hill on Saturday night. So I think the future's bright.
Do you think the location of that Minneapolis racetrack was really causing a big problem? Because that's kind of out in the middle of the country, wasn't it?
It was, but that whole area is kind of out in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have an answer for that. I never even went to that track, to be honest.
I've been by it. Know where it's at.
Yeah, I know.
But
Same
it just
here. I
kind
know
of looks
where
like
it's
away from a big fan base.
Well, Salina Speedway was a tradition for a lot of years, and I think they tried to port that tradition over to Minneapolis, and it never really worked.
But Salina's come back.
Salina has come back, and I haven't been out there yet, but I've heard they've done a really nice job kind of revamping and rebuilding the track. They've running late models there every other week now. Delbert Smith, Joe Gorby won the opening night out there, so I know that's caused a lot of excitement out there.
Yeah. What about how viable is NCRA racing right now? C. Ray Hall started the NCRA many, many years ago. They still have the classes. They still have the organizations running, mostly out of 81 Speedway, which is C. Ray Hall's racetrack. But and, of course, the Hutch Nationals have always been a big event. But just how viable is it?
C. Ray now has, under his promotional wing, he's got 81 Speedway, he's got the State Fairgrounds, he's got Enid Speedway in Oklahoma, and he's got the High Banks, the Belleville High Banks. And, matter of fact, I don't know that he promotes the High Banks anymore, but NCRA certainly still races there. I think NCRA's still got some viability. They've got some tracks where they're really solid. It's not what it used to be. At one time, the NCRA late model circuit was at least the equal of MLRA. It's not anymore. The 360 Sprint is a nice program, but it's sort of on the level of ASCS, but within a very tight area. On the other hand, I know C. Ray's poured an awful lot of energy into running multiple nights at 81 Speedway, and he's had a lot of success with that.
Yeah.
So I think that things ebb and flow. The thing of it is, there's a lot of people who have tried to run C. Ray Hall out of the sanctioning business before, and he's still kicking. There's got to be a reason for that.
Somebody asking me, when are you going to buy US 36 race? I'm not going to buy any racetrack. No
Just
way,
cut him a
man.
check.
No, I love US 36 Raceway. They're asking what the specials are going to be out there this year. US36raceway.com. They got several ASCS events up there. They got a big one that Scott's a big part of with TBJ Promotions on a couple of days before the 4th of July on July 3rd, I believe it is. And so that's going to be a big event. And they've got the Budweiser Shootout coming up there prior to that in June. And then I think got a big midget event going on up there in late July. But anyway, US36raceway.com. You can find out more information. They have not been a weekly track for some years now, which is very difficult for a lot of promoters to even want to take a chance of pulling off having a track that just runs specials. And I think I know the reason why promoters don't want to do that is because when they go out and buy food for their concessions, they want to sell that food. When you're running specials only, you got a lot of food that goes to waste.
Well, and there's another thing, too. When you're running a weekly racetrack, all your fans really need to know is be at Thunder Hill or be at Speedway X at 7 o'clock on Saturday night, and you're going to see racing. When it becomes a task for the fans to figure out when you're racing, you're going to lose a lot of your following. So, and there are some tracks that have so much pull that they can do that. Eldora Speedway being one example.
Right.
But it's a really tough struggle for a lot of other tracks to do it. I guess they're able to do it fairly well up there. It's been, 3 years since they had a weekly show.
Knoxville is kind of, they've had a downturn in their weekly attendance for a number of years and picked back up somewhat this past year. And, of course, they've got Toby Cruz in there running the racetrack. They open up tonight. But you're always thinking if there was a track that would run specials, it would be Knoxville. If there's another track that would run specials, you would think maybe Lucas Oil Speedway. But both those racetracks continue to run weekly programs.
Most of your big-name tracks have always been weekly tracks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the specials-only track is really a rarity in short-track racing. For years and years, Nashville was one of the big hub tracks of short-track racing at the fairgrounds, and they had a weekly show. A couple I can think of that are specials only, Winchester and Salem, seem to do fairly well at that.
Right.
Oswego, New York is another famous track. They run a weekly show. So I bet out of somewhere around 1,000 short tracks nationwide, there are less than 20 that are able to make a go of it running specials only.
When it gets to the point to where the facility costs more to maintain by opening it up weekly and you don't draw big crowds versus having specials only and drawing the big crowds. I think it has more to do with the setup of the facility. How expensive is it for you to swing the gates open of that racetrack and operate it? And you go to places like Eldora, which has got massive grandstand seatings, but so does Knoxville, and so does Lucas Oil Speedway, but yet they're able to, make that work. But that's where it becomes, if it's more costly for you to put 1,000 people versus packing it with 10,000 people, then that's when you see them go to special events.
Well, how many businesses can you think of that could survive only being open 20 days a year but paying a year's overhead?
Yeah.
I mean, think about that for a minute. That's short track racing right there.
The utility bills still come the year round.
Absolutely.
You still have to pay the utility bills all year round.
Absolutely. I remember when Dennis started running the Friday night program out at Valley, everybody kind of said, well, why in the world would he do that? Easy. You're doubling the number of dates that you're open, and you've got an opportunity to make a profit.
Except the light bill makes a difference when you turn those lights on. I don't think a lot of people realize the cost of turning lights on at a racetrack.
Your variable expenses essentially are the purse, insurance, and lights.
Right.
And those are big. Those are big variable costs. But your fixed costs, that track at Valley Speedway is going to eat some money on a Friday night, whether it's open or not.
Right.
It's Saturday morning. It's eating money right now. Next Wednesday, it's going to eat money because that's the nature of any business with a fixed location and overhead. Now, Dennis isn't going to try and run 7 nights a week and try and stay open 7 nights a week, but the more times that he can give himself an opportunity to make profit, the better off he is. And it works in reverse with a place like US 36 Speedway. You've got a track up there that it's eating money right now, but they're only going to be open, 10 nights a year?
But here's the key. He runs weekly. That drag strip up there is open every week.
That's a good point.
And that's why he is able to make that work.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. So he does have some cash flow on that. And, and I don't, folks, I don't pretend to know what the book's like on any of these racetracks around here. But I can tell you as a business owner myself, your business never stops consuming money. While you're sleeping, it's consuming money.
The racers and the fans don't stop to think about all the bills that these promoters got to pay. Hey, this is easy money. Let's go run a racetrack.
I know a lot of people
make lots and lots of money.
I know a lot of people who have gone broke on that philosophy.
Hey, it's like any other business. Really, it is. If you're going to get into the business of operating a racetrack, just go into it knowing you're going to lose money for a while before you start making money. Isn't that the way business is?
Oh, absolutely. And Scott and I have had this talk before as it concerned I-70 Speedway. And my comment on this a couple of years ago, and it may be worse now, I said anybody who buys I-70 Speedway is going to have to be able to put $5 million in one pile and anticipate probably dropping at least $500,000 a year for the first couple of years to get it rebuilt. I mean, when you're taking over, when the Conkrights bought Thunder Hill, I mean, they anticipated losing money for at least the first year because that's the way promotion is. It takes a while to get people accustomed to coming back. And it's going to be the same for
They've got the resources to be able, they know going in, they're great business people, they know going in that it's going to be a losing cause till they get it built up the way they want it to.
Absolutely. And I think they're doing pretty well now,
right.
Which is good. They deserve the success. The only time that you don't have that level of overhead to deal with and you end up paying it, it's just paid in a different way, is when you're leasing a track.
Right.
Like if somebody was going to promote Sedalia, they'd be paying lease payments. They wouldn't be paying out, they wouldn't be paying a mortgage or property taxes or any of those kind of ongoing bills. They would through the lease payments, but it's a weekly check that they'd have to write.
And it's hard to make money at Sedalia because whoever goes in there as the promoter is not going to get the concessions.
You've got to have a friendly fair board. And I mean that's something that I don't remember who it was who was going to try and reopen Bethany a couple of years ago for weekly racing, but that's something he found.
Jim Wilson had it open there for a while, the former
Yeah,
owner of the
I blinked my eyes.
WDRL.
I blinked my eyes, and I missed Jim's tenure up there. I mean, that was
he was open for 2 or 3 weeks, and that was about it. And you'd think he knows going in as his experience around racing what that would be like, but he didn't make it. And Phil Birkinshaw, who owns the new Atchison Speedway, had a thought of going in there and running Bethany, but now he's built his own racetrack that's going to be open around Memorial
Day weekend. He says there's actually going to be a race on that track. Kind of looking forward to seeing that.
And from the looks of the pictures on the forum board, he's done a lot of good things up there. My worry about that facility, room. Is there enough room for people? You've got a lot of grandstands constructed at Atchison Speedway. Is the property big enough? How far away are you going to park?